Well, good afternoon, everyone. This happens to be our sixth and final session this week of our ninth annual high performance camp. Obviously, we're not in Brooksville this year, but we're doing our best to do this virtually. But we want to welcome Rachael Maney here. From, I believe you're in Florida, isn't that right, Rachael?
I am.
Yeah, she is an advocate for all cyclists in the realm of bike law, or the laws that govern us. And she's a strong proponent for our safety, and she has some connections with us with her involvement with Dave McGrin as well. So I wanted to have her introduce herself, and after a presentation, maybe we could have a short question and answer session. I do know that Rachael needs to get to a previous scheduled event. Thank you, Rachael, for spending time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, I cannot tell you how appreciative I am for everything that everyone here has done. And I am just more than inspired to see how bicycling, how riding a bike continues to be, whether it's a therapeutic or cathartic or just joy inspiring thing for people of all walks of life, given any circumstance or condition. I'm the National Director of Bike Law. We are a network of bicycle crash attorneys that represent only cyclists. So a lot of times, you have a slip and fall, you bang your thumb with a hammer on a home improvement project, you're in an automobile collision, and there's a variety of resources to help you with representation. The only clients that we have are bicyclists. Bike Law was founded by my partner, Peter Wilborn, in September of 1998 because my brother-in-law, Jim, was killed while stopped at an intersection by an underage, unlicensed driver. Peter was living in Europe at the time, writing policy for the United Nations. He came back to the States to handle the management of his deceased brother's estate and his grieving widow. As the lawyer in the family, it just seemed like a natural thing to do. And when he spoke to the attorney that he hired, that lawyer asked if Jim had a DUI. And Peter was taken aback and said, "Why would you ask that?" And the attorney said, "Well, why else would a grown man be on a bike?" And that response was enough for Peter to recognize that the surgical skill set that he had in advocating for and representing other underrepresented people, underserved people, could be applied directly to advocating for and representing cyclists. So that's how that came to be 22 years ago. The other side of what Bike Law does outside of legal representation is exactly what Jody said, which is advocacy. And it's really, really important that we educate and illuminate and share the wealth of knowledge that we have and potential solutions to multifaceted problems to improve the conditions of bicycling for everybody that rides. A good friend of mine that happens to be an ambassador for the Bike Law Foundation, our nonprofit organization, is one of Carly McGrin's oldest childhood friends. They grew up together. And I received a phone call 2 summers ago that was the segue or the introduction for me to the McGrin family. And Carly ended up retaining us to represent her when David was killed. And over the last year and a half, almost 2 years, I now would consider Carly a member of our extended family. It's very, very difficult in my mind, and I'm sure that everyone here can relate to this in some form or fashion. It's very difficult to go through a traumatic experience with someone and not have them be a part of your life for the rest of your life. And so for me, people only call me on their worst day. And that is part of why we take our responsibility to people on bikes as seriously as we do. what we've seen happen with David's death is a national crisis. It's something that we see in every state across the country, where a reckless or negligent driver ends up walking away from or driving away from a catastrophic collision in which somebody on a bike is killed without the appropriate penalty or accountability. What we strive to do at Bike Law is two different things through the representation of our clients. It's to make sure that on the civil side of things, there's the appropriate compensation, that no stone is left unturned. And on the other end of things, by dovetailing the civil and the criminal procedures, we look to make sure that there's accountability on the criminal side of things as well. That is a very, very large hurdle. It's a kind of a Herculean task. Because the problem isn't necessarily a lack of legislation, it's a lack of willingness on the prosecution or the state side to connect the dots between reckless driving and vehicular homicide. I think that all of us recognize how important the bicycle is for a variety of reasons. For David, it was the vehicle or the tool that he used to regain some of the control that he lost when he was subjected to the things that he experienced while he was serving our country. Additionally, David, just as a humanitarian, kind of checks all the boxes as to how we identify our bike community. He was a family man. You know, he was Landon's baseball coach. He worked hand in hand with the chaplain at his job, which he took to help people who were in positions that needed someone to put some wind in their sails. You know, he took advantage of his GI Bill so that he could go back to school and help counsel those who may be struggling with some of the same things that he was experiencing. So across the board, as a husband, as a pastor, as a giver, as someone who is just very, very generous in all facets of his life. David's loss is one, I think, that has been felt geometrically, certainly not in a linear or immediate capacity. So my job and my role now, even though things on the civil side of that particular death case are coming to a close, my relationship with Carly and the McGrin family continues until we actually affect the type of change that is going to hopefully prevent anyone else from dealing with this type of tragic loss or suffering. Where we are with that is a pretty interesting place to be, especially given Florida being the kind of place that it is. One, it's conducive to being outside and riding a bike pretty much every day of the year. Even on its coldest or rainiest of days, you know, there are resources and ways to get outside. On the other hand, it's the deadliest place for a bicyclist to ride. The state of Florida accounts for almost 18% of all bicycle crash fatalities in the entire country. So what Carly and I are doing now is working with legislators, commissioners, people in positions of authority and power to enact a piece of legislation that I believe should be called the David McGrin Act, which would give prosecution and the state and the DA's office the ability to charge reckless drivers who cause serious bodily injury or death to a person on a bicycle with criminal charges. Did anybody have any questions about that specifically? No? Typically, and I know that you guys are working out, so it's probably also hard to talk while doing it. Let me just check this chat here. Absolutely. Yeah, sorry. I'm just reading some of the chat comments, and I have a hard time walking and chewing gum at the same time, so I apologize for the pause there. I find a lot of times that the best way for these types of things to go is to make it more of a conversation, so it's less of a lecture or a presentation. I want this to have kind of an organic flow. So what do you, I mean, what can we talk about? What can I offer maybe as a resource for any of you?
I'd like to ask Rachel, since actually, most of our athletes are in Florida, but how does the laws in Florida compare to those in other states? I know you have some experience in some of the East Coast states, and maybe they're pretty strong laws, not strong enough, but maybe they're strong by the American standard.
That's a great question. So, not just relevant to cycling, but there really isn't any nationally consistent traffic legislation outside of interstate trucking or carrying hazardous material from one state to the next. There are a few things that every state has, something that, some version of what we call the basic speed law, which says that for a motorist, every time you get behind the wheel, you are expected to operate that vehicle in a way that does not cause bodily harm, injury or death to anybody else. However, Florida is an interesting place because we tend to see much more aggressive penalties and a willingness to go after folks in some regards. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's a lot of loopholes and a lot of leniency that we might not see in other places. Because riding a bicycle, you are classified or you fall under the same umbrella as somebody operating a vehicle on the road. It's a complicated question. If we're looking for a state that has the best progressive or protective legislation for people on bikes or vulnerable road users, I'd probably say Delaware as being the model state. In Delaware, as a motorist, you must change lanes to safely pass a bicyclist, even if that means safely crossing over the double yellow. It puts the burden on the person in the vehicle as opposed to the burden on the person on the bike. Delaware has what's called a stop as yield law. People might recognize it more if I say the Idaho stop. That was a law that was enacted in 1982 in the state of Idaho. And what that said was that the bicyclist still has a responsibility to make sure that when they come to an intersection with the stop sign, that they can proceed safely, but they don't have to unclip or put their foot down to come to a complete stop. And the reason for that is multifaceted. First and foremost, it improves the flow of traffic. Second, it's actually safer for bicyclists because, as we all know, at least for me, when I was learning to ride a bike clipped in, me falling was much more likely to happen at a stop sign or at the top of a hill or when people were watching. And so the act of riding a bicycle is just by definition very different than driving a car, stopping and starting, same type of thing. Safe passing laws, that's something else, a 3-foot law, that's something that's in Delaware. And so what they put together was bike safe legislation as a package, and that passed. We don't have anything like that in Florida. However, we do have a willingness on a bipartisan scale by legislators to have conversations about what might make cycling safer for all of us on the roadways. I think a lot of it has to start before we look to change or implement new laws. I think that culturally and just logistically, infrastructure is really important. That being said, infrastructure is only as good as its connectivity, meaning if you're in a bike lane and it comes to a stop or it goes away, you approach an intersection and on the other side of the intersection, the bike lane doesn't connect or continue. Well, how good is that actual piece of infrastructure? So accessibility is important. And even more than that, making sure that we are paying attention to the people who are riding bicycles that don't have representation or who may already be marginalized. Our experience over the last, almost 2.5 decades is that if it's not safe to walk, it's not safe to ride. And if you wouldn't put your 10-year-old child or your 80-year-old grandmother on a bicycle, then I think the expectation that we are going to be safe on the roads is probably a foolish one. So it's a comprehensive approach. You know, we have to look at what laws could hopefully prevent or dissuade motorists from doing the types of things that cause us harm, as well as looking at how we provide safe spaces for people to ride at the same time.
Hey, Rachel, this is, I'm sorry, Rachel, this is, I'm sorry, were you finished with your question?
No, go ahead, Sean.
Okay, sorry. Rachel, I'm the one who texted that question to you, and I had a lawn mowing company right outside, so you couldn't hear me. That's why I texted. But basically, my question was, you know, our hand cycles. Many of us have a tendency to ride on trails, and many of them are rails to trails, and those rails to trails used to have crossing signs that would come down when a train came by. But when they turned into trails, those turned into stop signs. And there's been a miscommunication as far as a standardized thinking of how these need to be. In Central Florida, as I'm sure you're aware, like on the West Orange Trail and on the Seminole Wekiva and many others, the trail is a county property, but the roads are city property. And so there's this challenge and this lack of communication as to what is safe. And specifically, my question is, you know, some of these crossings have stop signs where the bikes are, and maybe stop signs for the cars. And so these cars are getting the impression that I understand that it's our responsibility to stay safe, but these cars are given the impression as though we have to stop, they have to stop, then we have to take turns. Well, 99% of the time, the cars just wave us on, and it's great and it's courteous and we all understand. But there's that 1% where we sometimes get complacent and we think that the car is going to wave us on, and they have dark tinted windows, and we assume and we roll on, and the car sees the stop sign and believes that we're going to stop. And so that causes problems. So what kind of legislation is being presented, or where is the ability to have some kind of standardized crossings where everybody understands what their responsibilities are on these crosswalks and these trail crossings?
Okay. First, it's a really, really good question. It's a very touchy subject because, as you mentioned, there are, you know, when you're talking about jurisdictional issues between cities or counties, or the county and the state, or, you know, any combination of those things, it becomes a lot more difficult to have productive conversations because nobody wants to give up their authority. I don't know that that it's a legislative issue as much as it is an educational issue. I think that, and it's funny because your question is sort of a follow-up to, or you're riffing off of what I just mentioned as far as like stop as yield, and you're proving the point exactly, which is that the idea of me, if I'm behind, most of us, most recreational bicyclists also drive a car. And in Florida, that is especially true because of things like separated land usage. We don't have the infrastructure to be able to commute from home to work or to the grocery store safely on a bicycle. So we all end up driving in some form or fashion. That being said, I know for me, it is much easier to come to a complete stop in my motor vehicle than it is on my bicycle any day of the week. There are just things about riding, by definition, it's imperfect, riding a bicycle. There should be conversations on the most local of levels that express and explain to drivers or to motorists what that means, that when you are on a bicycle, you should have, you certainly should be able to operate that bicycle in a way that is not dangerous for you without worrying about taking on added burden that should be placed on the motorist, right? The idea, kind of like Spider-Man, right? You know, with greater power comes greater responsibility. That's the idea. That's not how laws are written all the time, and it's certainly not the culture of the way that we do things, but that has to start at a smaller or a lower level, education first. I think that the idea when you see those stop signs is that you're expected to treat those traffic signals the way that you would if you were in a motor vehicle. If you are on the roadway, your bicycle is considered a vehicle the same way that a car is, with different privileges for sure. So we have to unpack that, and we have to have conversations with county commissioners. We have to have conversations with mayors, with people who are tasked with implementing and designing this infrastructure so that we can do so in a way that makes sense. It's a lot easier to sit down with planners before something is built than it is to try to put the toothpaste back in the tube. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. But a more specific question or an opinion for you is, do you feel that they should be stop signs, or do you feel that they should be more like caution signs, or is there a better way of communicating the responsibility of the bike so that way the driver doesn't assume that the bicycle will stop?
You know, I believe, my opinion, right? My opinion is based on statistics. It's based on mathematical fact and the what we have seen happen over the last now almost 4 decades. When a bicyclist can treat a stop sign as a yield sign, the prevalence of crashes and crash fatalities decreases. That being said, there has to be an understanding that that doesn't mean that if you're on a bicycle and you're in a place where there is a stop as yield or Idaho stop, that you just blow through any intersection without looking. You still have to make sure that it's safe to do so. However, you know firsthand that coming to a complete stop at that intersection is much harder for you, and then starting again, than it is for the motorist to have a stop sign there and to say, okay, at the intersection of this trailhead, my responsibility is to come to a complete stop, so that if there is a vulnerable road user or someone who would have to exercise that responsibility with more difficulty, that the burden's on me, the motorist, to make sure that they are able to cross safely. That's just my opinion. My opinion is that most motorists are going to break the law every time they get behind the wheel. You know, if you drive more than 1 mile over the posted speed limit, you know, one could say, well, you fall into that category. If you do a California stop, you know, you roll through the intersection because it's safe to do so without coming to a complete stop, you've broken the law. You know, there's a variety of things. If you don't use your signal or your blinker, if you're not 3 car lengths behind the vehicle in front of you, all of those things happen pretty much every time somebody drives, right? So the idea would be to take the burden off the cyclist. It is a smarter way to approach things. That, my opinion, my belief is absolutely, you know, when you're on that trail, that stop sign, I think, should still exist to indicate that you have intersecting traffic. However, I do believe that the cyclist should have the option to treat it as a yield if it is safe to proceed through that intersection, you know, without causing a collision.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. And I also think that in Florida, we're a long way away from that happening. It's possible. It's just going to take a unified effort to get that done.
Bill Swick has a question, please. Bill?
Yes, this is Bill Swick. I had a question regarding not so much going after, the driver of the vehicle that causes these accidents, but I think a lot of times the city is at fault for either, inadequate, they let the trees grow over into the median, into the road to make sure that there's not a lot of shoulder on the road. Sometimes there's construction areas that you have to cut in. And then just a lot of times, I live in Annapolis, Maryland, just the lack of availability of usable bike lanes and shoulders sort of ask for an accident waiting to happen. Even if people are being good drivers, when you have a 40-mile-per-hour road with zero shoulder and blind curves, you're in jeopardy every time you're in those roads. So I wonder, from a litigation point of view, is there an opportunity to sort of go after the cities and say, hey, we're trying to, this is a safety issue. Can we improve on the shoulders and sort of just do a better job to pay attention that bikers actually do utilize these roads?
It's a great question, Bill. Did you say you're in Annapolis?
I am. I'm in Annapolis, Maryland.
Okay. So I grew up in Baltimore. Actually, we just testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee in Annapolis for the vulnerable road user law in Maryland. We represent the 7 cyclists, including Candy Carter, Arthur Carter's widow. He was the Air Force veteran that was killed last March in Annapolis in Anne Arundel County. The answer to the question is yes, but it has to, there's an order of operations. So in order to go after the city or the municipality, you first have to be able to show that you've made them aware of the problem that needs to be fixed. Potholes are another great example. You know, it is the responsibility of whoever owns that roadway to make sure that it is fit for travel. So a lot of times what you see, you know, in places where there's only one way to get from point A to point B, and that one way happens to be an unsafe roadway with lots of damage to it, or bike lanes that are not maintained, or like you said, the overgrowth of trees or bushes or things like that. Those complaints should be registered in a formal fashion to the municipality, or if it's a state-owned road, to the Department of Transportation, so that they're made aware and put on notice of what the problem is. And then if they don't do anything about it, then you can hold them responsible.
You see, thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. So I'll pay attention to it and then try to formally address the issues I see around here in Annapolis. One comment. Were you once a math major? I hear a lot of math language.
No, but it's funny because in doing what we do, a lot of it is based on exactly that. It's the way that we approach bike advocacy and the improvement of the conditions for people on bikes is very mathematical. Numbers don't lie. And so what we try to do is look at the factual statistics as opposed to using anecdotal information to affect change. Bill, one of the things that you could do, a great resource for you in Annapolis, is Bike AAA. If you want to send me an email, it's Rachael, RACHAEL @bikelaw.com, and I will connect you with John Corin and Nigel Samaru, who run Bike AAA, and they can give you some guidance and help you with some of those infrastructure issues that you mentioned, and they are local to you. John's in Annapolis, so you guys are kind of next door neighbors.
Okay, yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I'll do that.
Yep.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Jay. So here in Colorado, they have a lot of bike paths that cross roads, and a lot of time they'll try to have the pedestrian buttons at those crosses. And what I found is a lot of time they're nowhere where a hand cycle can get.
Right.
So then we're forced to cross the road without a signal. Now, I've had a couple of times where I started where there's no cars and someone comes flying down and they have to hit their brakes because I'm in the road, because they didn't have that warning sign or they turned a blind corner. And think about who would be at fault. Now, I have let the city know about that problem, and they're trying to work. They've done some intersections, but they're moving really slow. I mean, how would you even handle that kind of situation?
So thank you for bringing that up. You know, the best example I can use, you know, the court of public opinion is a very powerful thing. You know, anytime you check into any hotel, there are rooms that are accessible to people that have physical limitations or disabilities. You know, there's options everywhere. You know, go into a public place, you know, it has to be accessible to people that get around in any way, shape, or form, right? So city infrastructure is no different. What I can do is this. Maybe what Jody can do is, I'm sure that he has all of your contact information and he can provide you with mine. What I can do is I can connect you with my Bike Law Colorado lawyer, and sometimes reaching out to a municipality or to the state or to an organization. Sometimes having a letter come from a lawyer is a little more, it just kind of bumps you up to the, to the top of the priority line. And so we're absolutely happy to do that for you and make sure that we get the ball rolling and stay on top of them to see it through.
Awesome, thank you. Because I've been working in the city, but I ride between Aurora, Denver, Littleton. So I prefer to handle it at a state level and have them try to, make because we've got some great things, some like full bike lanes that are barricaded, the bike lights for intersections. But so they've been building up the road versus the trails. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and the other thing is that, USA Cycling is headquartered in Colorado. And so I can also, that's a resource. We're the exclusive legal benefit to USA Cycling. So there are a variety of different ways to approach this using the resources that we have. So if you, send me an email, then we can schedule a phone call and just kind of strategize the best way to do it. I'll include Brian Weiss, who is my Colorado lawyer. He comes with a little bit more muscle and firepower. As opposed to being a constituent, who's trying to get things moving, and we can just take it from there.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead. Next question, please. We've got about 10 or 12 minutes left.
Hi, Rachel. This is Lee.
Hi, Lee.
Hey. Most of the people on today apparently live in cities, and they have their unique challenges, obviously, for cyclists. But can you address resources for those of us who live in exclusively rural areas that do not have bike trails, that often do not have shoulders on the road? And I've been riding bicycles on the road since the 1980s, when I was an upright racer, long before my injury. And it is far more unsafe now. And I think the advent of the cell phone in the car is linked very heavily to the distraction of drivers. So I'm presuming that you look in bike law at all of those aspects inside a vehicle that make it more difficult for us to safely ride on the road. But can you address resources for rural areas?
Absolutely. So what you said is 100% correct all the way across the board. In fact, the statistics are that 85% of all fatal crashes happen on arterial or rural roads. They do not happen on highways like most people might want to say. They don't happen on these very, very high speed, freeway systems. I live in a very, very small town in Central Florida called Montverde, and the closest city would be Claremont, and then I'm 22 miles east of Orlando. When I wake up every morning, I look out in my backyard, I see bobcats, bald eagles, gopher tortoises, and it's like the Mutual of Omaha. So I understand rural riding for sure. I moved basically into the middle of the woods for a reason. But we're faced with the same problems. A lot of rural roads, while they may not be as highly trafficked, meaning the density of vehicular traffic, a lot of times they're not maintained as well. There is no shoulder. The DOT comes in and cuts in those rumble strips, to help motorists that are falling asleep behind the wheel. So they take up the shoulder that you may have had before. And there certainly aren't any bike lanes. The best place to go, and really, where do you live?
I live in North Carolina in Sampson County, which is highly agricultural.
Okay, I'm not familiar with, can you give me the closest metropolitan city?
It is halfway between Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Cumberland County, and Goldsboro, North Carolina, and Wayne County.
Okay. Yeah. So this is another question or topic that I think, and especially North Carolina. So let me preface it with this. There are states in this country that are what we call contributory negligence states. And what that means is that if you are found to have contributed 1% to the crash, then you are barred 100% from any civil recovery. North Carolina is one of those states. If you, as a bicyclist, were to be hit by a driver while riding your bicycle, and you were to, let's say, not have a properly functioning light, rear red blinky light, at dusk, you would be barred 100% from any civil recovery. The reason I bring that up is because it's very, very important in those states, Alabama, Maryland, North Carolina, and Virginia, to know what the bike laws are relevant to where you're living and where you're riding. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I can connect you with Ann Groniger. She's in the Charlotte area. However, she's Bike Law North Carolina, and her level of expertise with these types of things is significant. She sits on the board of Bike Walk North Carolina, as well as other local advocacy groups, and has a lot of functional professional relationships with the people who could assist you in figuring out, one, what are the local resources, and two, what can be done to improve the infrastructure that you have living in a rural part of the state.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I'll email you and request that contact info.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, next question.
Jody, let me jump in here. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Listen, as a cyclist, specifically hand cyclist, I've been riding the roads for 18 years, a little over that. Like many people, was mostly rural riding until I moved to California. A lot of that riding has been all over the country because I'm never anywhere for very long, but most of it has been the rural riding. A fair number of it is down in the South, where that girl was just from. And recently, in the last probably year and a half, I've had altercations. I've been hit 3 different times. And basically, overall, that time I've learned some things, and I just kind of wanted to jump in on a few things that people had brought up. Unfortunately, there's places that have trails. Trails are great, but car operators, they may wave you on 90%, 99% of the time or whatever, but you can never assume it. Assuming it is just, like you said, Sean, that 1% is where you get into trouble. It sucks. It's an inconvenient to have to stop when you're trying to train or do whatever, but it's far better than spending days or weeks or months in the hospital. That's, it stinks. And I agree. There should be a situation where the drivers are educated on how to approach those situations. Once again, though, it takes everybody to be educated. And along that same line, you can have drivers that just are not going to like cyclists. When you get your group cyclist out there on your Saturday mornings, and they're riding 2, 3, 4 abreast on a road that doesn't have a shoulder, or certain situations where they're taking up more space than legally they're supposed to, and they do it for safety or for whatever reasons. It just upsets drivers, and that driver may know, but he's gonna retaliate, and that's another thing that sucks. Country riding, I found that being careful is exceptionally important. Multiple flags, multiple lights, if possible. But the other thing is the more the road that you take up, the more visible you are, and the less it's crazy. You want to stay to the right and protect yourself and give the driver more room, but the more room you give them, the more risk that they put you in, not vice versa. Lastly, you can be as careful as you possibly can. You can follow every rule, every law. And what this young lady was saying about the numbers, it really, depending on where you live, it doesn't come down to if you ever are hit by a car, it's when you will be hit by a car, depending on the amount of time that you ride and how often you're out there. And, Friday afternoons, stay off the roads. People are in a hurry. They don't care. And the other thing is nowadays versus 15, 20 years ago, I think the level of education is diminished as far as how drivers respect the roads. But the other thing is there's far less law enforcement out there that are making people or giving people the backlash to drive safer and stay within the speed limits that are posted. So more people speed now and more people are distracted than ever. It's unfortunate. That's all. Thank you for all your guidance, ma'am.
Matt, so much of what I was going to check to see if maybe we had done a bike law hire that I was unaware of. Everything that you've said is pretty much spot on. I think that there's one nuanced comment that I have just to address one of the points that you made in reference to taking the lane, that while it is intuitive to stay as far right as practicable for the reasons that you listed, there is certainly statistical evidence that shows in other places, that, the more you hug the curb, the more berth a motorist may take. I think the only, and not to play devil's advocate, but what we have found and what we're seeing is that the uptick in hit and runs, in crashes that are caused by distracted, reckless, or intoxicated drivers, it doesn't matter where you ride, and it doesn't matter what you're wearing, and it doesn't matter how many flags you have. It doesn't matter if you're in a recumbent, a hand cycle, an upright, a cruiser, a cargo bike. If someone is not paying attention, or if they are drunk or on drugs or whatever it might be, and that doesn't mean that they have the intention to harm you, but intent is not synonymous with harm. They're going to collide with you. They're going to hit you if they're going to hit you. And one of the things that you said that really, I say it often, is that these days it really isn't if, but when. And that's not meant to scare people, because the act of riding a bicycle is first and foremost probably the fastest way to save the world, and it's not inherently dangerous. However, when you homogenize a human being on a bicycle, any type of bicycle, with a 3,000 pound box of steel traveling 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, I don't think anybody here needs a lesson on what the outcome of any one of those interactions would be. We're going to lose every single time. So I think that the answer in short order to all of these questions is to exercise common sense and to do what we can when we can to posture ourselves in the most proactively safe position until we get to a place where the cultural change has been so significant that riding a bicycle is by definition the best, safest, and easiest way to get from point A to B.
Yeah, totally agree. My comment on the side of the road had more to do with a lot of situations where the driver does see you. If you're as far to the right as can and a vehicle's coming the opposite direction, they will inherently try and pass you.
Sure.
And it's always either put the other vehicle coming in harm's way or put the cyclist in harm's way.
Right.
And like you said, more often it's the cyclist. So
Yeah. And it's the
a
same
learning thing.
phenomenon.
It's just
Yeah.
a learning.
No, absolutely. And it's the same phenomenon. You know, there's evidence to show that drivers are more aggressive when a cyclist is wearing a helmet versus not wearing one, as if wearing a helmet is going to protect anything
Yeah.
from your face down from the impact of a motor vehicle. You know, it's absolutely, it's cultural for sure. Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to acknowledge that we were graced with 45 minutes of your time, and I want to give you the opportunity to bow out and appreciate your time. I know you have other things to do today.
So I'm in Jacksonville right now. It's about 55 degrees and it looks like it's about to storm, and I'm going to sit for 2 hours and watch my son play soccer. But Jody and I have been trying to connect like this for a while. I'm glad that we were able to do it. I would love to return. And, you know, one of the things that I'd like to offer to everybody here is that there are ways to get involved with what we're doing to kind of address all of these issues that you're each bringing up, all of which are completely valid. And I think that you have important voices. You know, I think that the bike community is a marginalized one to begin with, regardless of how we ride or why we ride or where we ride. But I think that when we look at our community and the subgroups of people within that community, I think that there's a place for representation for your community. And I encourage all of you to continue to do what you're doing, because I think people should know, you know, that you also have very specific needs that are entitled to be met.
Thank you again. And we're aspiring to be in Brooksville next year at this time. So
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. To make 2021 less of a continuation of 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, if I can figure out how to get this, you know, Jody, you can just give to everybody my email address. And so if anybody had any questions or things for which they need any sort of assistance, you can reach out to me directly and I will get you linked up with the local resource for you or any organizations that could be helpful in addressing these issues. And of course, if anybody ever has an experience, you know, that where you need legal assistance, you can reach out at any time. We're not a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 organization. That's not when crashes occur. So feel free to reach out, and I really appreciate your hospitality.
Yeah. And just to be certain, it was Rachael@bikelaw.com.
That is absolutely right. And you spelled it the right way, because if you forget that second A, I won't get the email.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Rachael. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.
Good day. Well, so I think we could talk more on this subject after we get Ralph involved in what's been prescribed for the day. Ralph?
Yes, ma'am. So, how much time I have?
Oh, as long as you need, as long as you have 50 minutes, 50 if you want.
50. Oh, unbelievable. And first I like to say hello to Mark.
They dragged me kicking and screaming in here just to see your face.
It's so good to see you. You're looking like 10 years younger since we haven't seen each other.
Yeah. Wait, let me read my cue card. You look younger too, Ralph. Got it.
You are the first one who is saying that to me. Thank you. It's good that you're here.
Okay.
Cool. First, I like to give us a small feedback about the last 5 sessions, because we have heard different things. On the first day, we had a very good session with Tim DeFries. Tim was at that moment when he have been a part of our session in his training camp in elevation in Namibia. So we spoken a little bit about the adjustment or the option, how our body is reacting of training in elevation. And I want to give you some more details about this, because there was some point which have been mentioned by Tim about the red blood cells. So the options how our body can react on training and elevation is a little bit more difficult than only have a positive adjustment of the red blood cells. That means that our body can react in a very different way. So the one thing is, and this is the old stuff, it's which everyone is mentioned about training and elevation, is to get a higher amount of red blood cells. And this is only maybe for 20 or 30% of the athletes the way how it works. And a long time in a science, and half of every athlete thought if you have not higher red blood cell count after training and elevation, you are non-responder. But this is not the right way. So if you have not a higher red blood count after training and elevation, your body is reacting in a different way. So you can, next to having a better blood count, a higher option of HB mass. So how you can transfer the blood or the oxygen is one option. The other option is how you breathe can be changed through training and elevation. The next option is how your body is using carbs and oxygen after this kind of training block. So we have a lot of different situations how our body can react after a training camp in elevation. So, and this needs a lot of more research than only to take blood after you have staying in elevation. Yeah, so if you have the opportunity to go to train in a higher elevation and you want to see if you're reacting positive of this kind of training, you have to do a multiple test. One thing is for sure the red blood cell, but on this other side you have to test the VO2, you have to test the how you're using carbs. So be not as easy as only to analyze the red blood cells. This is important, so you have more ideas what can happen during a style or a training in higher elevation. The next thing is higher training or training in elevation starts at 1,800 meters. So if you stay below like 1,500 meters, the positive benefit on your body is very low. So it's not necessary to talk about training in elevation when you're staying below 1,800 meters. And then there's a lot of different researches which elevation is the best to get the most adjustments. And there's between 2,300 and 2,800 meters for your training. But there are only a few places in the world where you can still train under good conditions, like weather, temperature, hill climbs, and everything. So mostly everyone is training between 1,800 and 2,100 meters. It's about 7,000 feet, I think, around. And that area you should train if you're going for elevation training. The next thing is, and this is the most important thing in my eyes, to have success with your training in elevation. After 2 or 3 days of staying at the higher elevation, you have to do a test. If you do not use, or if you haven't a test, you have no idea how much you're losing at that elevation. Everyone have some lose of abilities in the higher stage. So you have to test yourself. You have to see your right training zones. If not, or the way that you train too hard is very high. And then you're coming back home after 2 or 3 weeks of training, and you're thinking you have done the best training camp ever, but after 1 week, you're feeling you lost a lot. So without any tests in elevation, it's very difficult to train in a proper way. Okay, so this is about elevation or training in altitude. Is there any question from you at this topic?
Hey, Ralph. I have a few things to mention.
Maybe a bench of questions because you're staying at a higher elevation.
No, yeah, but this is actually, so since I've been here for a little bit, I've been doing some research, and some of the things that were really important too, that there was like an acclimatization stage where like it depends on the athlete, and they're exposed to elevation, but let's say for an athlete that is brand new to elevation, like when they first come to elevation, it's like really important to start monitoring the oxygenation level, the SpO2, and there in like, of course, when you go first to elevation, like it could go down to like 89%, 88, and then it says like it could be like 3-4 days until you start seeing like the regular SpO2 in elevation could be like around 93, and that's like a really good sign for you to start, because like if you start working out before your SpO2 like regulates, it's kind of like the same thing, but like your body's still not accustomed to that elevation, so you're pretty much you don't have the same amount of or you're not using the same amount of oxygen. So like it was something I read that it was like really important to monitor those values when you first come to elevation, to see how your body is like starting to acclimatize to that elevation. So I mean, just something that I read, that it was like really important to. It was like could be like 4 or 5 days for somebody that doesn't go to elevation, or maybe 3 days for somebody that's really used to traveling and being in elevation all the time.
Yeah, this is the point why you should do the test after 2 or 3 days and not immediately when you arrive. If you're testing immediately, you will have a new test after 5-6 days test or days again. So go to the elevation, 2 days training, resting, and then starting with a good test, and then you have the best numbers for the 2-3 weeks of staying there. Different question, other questions? So the last thing about elevation training, or 2 more points, if you're staying in elevation, the drinking is where, or how you take fluid to yours, very important, because you're losing a lot of more water at high elevation than on sea level. So you need to drink more than on sea level. I know this is sometimes for people with a spinal cord injury difficult, because they are always thinking, oh, I have to go to pee more than normal goes. But drinking is a very important thing at higher elevation. And the last thing is, you burn more energy at higher elevation. That means you are allowed to eat more and you have to eat more on higher elevation, especially if you're there for a training camp. So for sure, everyone is happy if he can lose easier weight. But you will see if you not eat in a proper way on a high elevation, you will lose a lot of energy and you are not able to train in a proper way after 2 or 3 weeks. So these both points are still very important if you're going to high elevation. So the next point I want to talk about is what we have heard from Peter in the second session. And this was very interesting. And he said that people with a H1 level, or it's if you are in the H2 level and you have less muscle mass, you can train harder because you have only a small amount of muscles. And this is completely wrong. Yeah, this is completely the opposite. Because if you have a small amount of muscle mass, you have less potential to adjust of the amount of work you did earlier. So the potential of adaptation of sport is directly linked to the muscle mass. So if you have more muscle mass, you have more potential to create higher amount of muscle mass. So this is, you need more time to recover. You need less work per hour if you have less muscle mass. So it's completely the opposite. For sure, and this is the thing, what I think he thought, I'd like to say, you can train for your amount a short time very hard. And in percentage of your completely muscle mass, you're doing it harder than someone who has more muscle mass. But the reaction and the adaptation is less than with someone who have more muscle mass. And it's going look a little bit deeper inside. If you have a high amount of muscle mass and you're train a lot, you need much more training again to stay stable in the same level. That means on the other side, if he would train less, he can have more from his training because his body would better react on his training. Yeah. So meaning for us, like someone who have, let's talk about cycling. There I have a good example. We're talking about someone like Tony Martin. Tony Martin has huge, big legs. And he is one of the best athletes, or he has been one of the best athletes. And to stay at the same level, he needs 20, 24 hours of training only to reach the same level. If he would spend less hours, he would lose muscle mass and his abilities to reach high power. On the other side, if I have small amount of muscle mass, I need only a few hours to get the next level. Yeah, so that is very important to understand and not to think that if I have a small amount, I can train as hard as possible and my body will react in a positive way. No. Yes, you need more time for recovering. Your body needs more time to get the next level. On the other side, for example, like I would say Tom Davis, with his big amount of muscles, needs much more training to stay in the same level. If he would reduce his training, he will go down. Okay, questions to this point?
So question. So you say, if I understand you correctly,
Who's
if
that?
you have a lot of muscle, your muscle consume more oxygen. That means you fatigue faster?
No. No, you need a specific amount of workload that you can get the next level. And if you have a huge amount of muscle mass, you need more workload to get the next level. And if you have a very small amount of muscles, you need less training to get the next level.
Okay, thank you.
So
So-
Ralph, so obviously you're talking, so obviously for hand cyclists, you're talking just all upper body. So, you know, you're smaller muscle than, right?
Yeah, the meaning is the guy from Tuesday have been an H1 athlete. So he
Okay.
has a very low amount of muscle mass. He has only the biceps. Yeah, he has only a little bit of shoulder muscles.
Right.
And he said that he can, because of this little amount of muscle mass, better train hard than someone who has more muscle mass. And
Okay.
this is the opposite. Yeah. Other question?
It's kind of like working out. You know, you go to the gym, you see the guys with the bigger muscles. They got to push more weight. They got to stay in the gym longer. They got to do a lot more to maintain or to grow. Where the guy starting out that has smaller muscle mass, he's going in there and he can push less weight and get more out of what he's doing than say the bigger guys. So that's a great way to look at it. And this, what I've come to find out from listening to a lot of your athletes, Ralph, is there's a fine line between the right amount of muscle and having too much muscle in regards to how we train to improve on the hand cycle.
Yes, but one point is, and this is maybe sometimes what is not this good approach for this is, it's not only about strength training and power training. The same is for the transport and using of oxygen. Yeah. So if I'm talking about muscle mass, I'm not talking about strength training. I'm talking about riding a bike, using a high amount of oxygen. Yeah. And that is the same. So if, for example, someone have like the Peter as an H1 athlete, if he riding 1 hour, he's using a small amount of muscles and he's using a small amount of his oxygen, and that's enough. Someone with a big engine like Tom Davis, for example, I have no idea what kind of numbers he have, but I'm seeing what he's pushing, and it's always about amount of oxygen. Yeah, so bigger arms in hand cycling and a good VO2 max needs more oxygen per hour than someone who have a small amount of muscles. Yeah, and so this is always about the amount of work per hour. Will.
I think Holly has had her hand up for a long time to make a comment. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but I was just wondering if maybe what Peter was alluding to was that the variation between his maximum intensity, medium intensity, and lowest intensity, right, was so much smaller. So he could be training what was essentially, at that higher intensity level, and then maintain that.
No.
Because of that variation, maybe. I don't know if maybe that's what he had meant.
But this is again, this is maybe it looks like because you're using smaller power numbers, so the variation is for sure smaller, but the percentage you're using is the same.
I agree, right? But I mean, he specifically said he doesn't use power very often. So yeah, so it was just, using that RPE, and maybe that was kind of the point that he was trying to make, but it came across differently.
Yes, but maybe, and this is what I'm like to say, that if we are listening to someone and he's saying something like this, we have to clarify it. Not
Agreed.
that you are thinking what he said, and maybe it's a misunderstanding.
Oh, because it's time for me to go 40 hours a week.
Okay. Can I talk with your wife first?
She says she's already put a note on that.
Okay. Other question about that point? Okay, then I have one last thing of the last few days, and this is about the time trial of yesterday and my development, or the next level of more information of wheelchair users. So I told you yesterday that we have done last September the 20 minutes time trial, and I was surprised about the blood numbers you sent to me after this. And I want to explain it only a little bit, that who interesting in how our body is working. I want to explain it a little bit on a scale. Okay, are you interested? It's only 10 minutes, and if you're not thinking you or not like to see it, close your eyes, go for a dinner, but for who is interesting, I will explain it. So Jody, can you give my screen free? Oh, okay, already here. So first I'm starting with this document. So everyone can see the small numbers. So I want to explain it. We had a 20 minutes time trial. During the 20 minutes, the lactic acid concentration have been following. The starting level have been 2 millimole. And at the end of the 20 minutes, the guy or the girl had 12 millimole. After 20 minutes, same power. That means that there was an increasing level of lactate concentration of 0.5 per minute. So with this number, I can work in a different way. So, and this is the result of a cyclist. So I haven't to use the numbers of an athlete of us. And I don't like to share the numbers of someone who is around. So, and the very important point is how our body is reacting after behind the threshold. So the threshold of this athlete is where the both lines cross the x-axis. So he crossed the line at 234. If this athlete now able to produce per minute 0.5 lactic acid, he would be able to push for the 20 minutes 268. The meaning is he is 30 watts above his threshold. Yeah, and this is for 20 minutes for an able-bodied person very difficult. But we have seen it last year for all of our athletes. The meaning is that we have seen, yes, last year in the calculation of threshold and producing lactic acid, our body of a wheelchair user is acting in a different way. And this is, from my side, was a big step for the future. So for this, at this moment, thank you. So we have a new idea how our body is working. The change, what I have seen now, is how and where our body take the lactic acid. So in an able-bodied person, it's about 50%, the area of space in the body. In a wheelchair user, it depends on the level of injury. And if you have a high level of injury, you have a much smaller space. It's about 25 to 30%. The meaning for this is you are able to get a higher lactic acid concentration. So the threshold is the same, but you are able to produce a higher amount, and the amount is creating much higher than we thought. And this is incredible. And so we have seen that someone of you is able to do it with 50 for 20 minutes. And this is in able-bodied sports, maybe for 10 minutes possible, maybe for 8 minutes. So we have a completely new understanding of higher numbers for wheelchair users. And the other thing is, we can see with this 20 minutes test, if we are doing this after a while and after a time of testing, how the VO2 max or the LA max changed. Therefore, I go back again to this. So let's say we have this increasing number at 268. So he should have, after the 20 minutes test, 10 millimoles. And no, 12. And if he has only 8 or 7 millimole after the test, we know that the VO2 max increased again. So we can adjust our results with this 20 minutes when we are comparing the change in lactate concentration after this kind of test. So we have a new tool to get better for the future. Okay, cool. Any question about this? Only the easy questions, please.
Yeah, so pretty much what does this mean? That yeah, like I don't know, like what does that mean for all of us that have been testing for the past years with you? Like in terms of like our results could have been different, or like or like how, you know, how does that represent in our results now?
So the most important thing is that the VO2 and the LMX are the same. These numbers are not changed.
Okay.
So the change is the level of the anaerobic threshold. So if the threshold is at 110 or 120 watts. So, and the first increasing of lactic acid is the same. It's only the threshold which is changed, and changed because it's not anymore at 4 millimole. It can be much higher. Yeah. So this is a big change. And at the beginning, when I saw the first results last September, I was thinking, what in hell? Maybe they have not any idea about testing and made a big mistake. So that the system is not running well. And then since then, we are doing every single test in Germany in my lab, as well with this 20 minutes test for hand cycling. And now we're getting more and more numbers for the different levels of injury height.
But like the desired result of the test is the same. Like we still want a low BLA and a high.
So the idea is absolutely the same. Yeah. So the function of our body is the same. The only thing is what changed is how lactic acid is dispersed within our body.
Okay.
This changed the threshold and the option, the higher level of the tolerating of lactic acid.
Okay. And that's completely related to the, pretty much to the same thing that Peter was saying. Since we have less amount of muscle mass, it gets distributed within less part of the body. So like it doesn't go to our legs, it just stays in our upper body.
Right. He can, when we measure his lactic acid concentration, for his small amount of muscles, we can measure a high number. And we are thought that he is using a much higher intensity of training. But this is not the case. It's only the case is the body is not able to take the blood concentration in different parts of the body. So it's directly seeable in the blood.
Okay. So it's more concentrated. I understand that.
Yeah. And this is, so it's again, in his words, wrong what he's saying. It's only a higher number, but it's not more intensive.
Yeah, I understand that for sure.
Yeah.
So where you take your blood sample, does it matter? For example, if you take a blood sample at your feet, does it matter?
No, normally not. So, but for a wheelchair user at this moment, it could be or there could be a change. This is at this moment unclear. Normally in our body, the blood concentration is at any place the same.
The same.
Yeah, you have not less red blood cells in your food or in your right hand compared to your left hand. So the blood concentration of all the numbers is the same. But now maybe it could be that because of the different blood flow, there can be a different concentration in a very high level injury of spinal cord user. But I don't think so. The problem is more that the where the water and the muscles around in the body. This is the part where lactate acid can be, and this is changed. So the blood concentration or the blood picture is the same at any place, but the place where the body can get the lactate concentration is changed. So still, I think there's no chance, or there's no different if I'm taking your right finger, left earlobe, or your leg. It's still should be the same. It's more where we can get the blood and the lactate concentration within the body. Cool. There is someone who is thinking now.
Yes.
So Will, what was your question, please?
Going back to what Ricky said, and what a couple other people were thinking, really this change or this new understanding has more to do with how you will coach the athlete than how the athlete actually responds to the thought or the anomaly that you came up with. The athlete's going to pretty much, their body's going to continue to do what it does, but now you can coach us differently.
Exactly. So I have a better knowledge now to coach everyone much better than in September. And we have a better idea how we can get faster in a time trial. And we can set now the zones of a training more or much better than before September. And I would say we haven't been bad until September. So we are from September getting much better again. So we reach another level, but for the athletes, there's no change. They won't see any change. The training is completely the same. And the idea about VO2 max and LA max is completely the same. It's only to find the zones. It's changed.
It's more accurate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It just gave you better visibility. That 20 minutes.
Absolutely. Yes, that's right. And last answer for that, and then we are going to Jody. Yes, I would like to test this, Will. If I had the option to measure it for each one, or to 5% how he is dispersing the blood, it would be great. But it's I'm looking for the answer, how to test that.
To test what?
In which area the body take the blood for lactic acid. So at this moment, I would say someone like an age 2 athletes have 32% of the body.
Yeah.
And an age 5 athlete with only an amputation of the
only
of a small part of the leg is at 48%.
Huh.
And I am at a able body with no, maybe a little bit, have 50%.
50?
Right. Yeah. And no one needs to poking tools. It's still the earlobe. We won't change it. This is, again, what I'm looking for is a different thing. It's not to see if you have a different lactate concentration in your earlobe or in your finger or in your right ass side. It's different what I'm looking for.
You say your right ass side?
Yes. Okay. Cool. Jody, I'm done.
Oh, okay, Liz.
One second, Jody. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Our guest from UK liked to ask something, and I think she had a hard life because now it's Brexit and COVID. So
Oh my God.
give her the chance to ask.
Life is bad. You mute it, unmute it.
Just as well I am muted because I swore. So does it mean, so what does it mean when somebody has 20, 50, a massive amount of lactate in their body?
No, it's not. There's not. So it's the part where we can
concentrate
get the lactate concentration.
Yeah.
Changed with someone who is with a high level.
Yeah.
Have a smaller part of his body where he can take it.
Yep.
The
But does that affect, it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect the actual muscles though. It doesn't affect their RP or the way they can push harder or the way they feel when they race or nothing like that, or it does?
It makes a very big change in analyzing the testing.
Right.
So when you had a higher amount at the end of a specific stage, doesn't mean that you're above your threshold.
Huh.
Yeah. But this is the thing, we have a new view on zones, how we have to train, in which area we have to train.
That's the bit I don't get.
Say it again.
That's the bit I don't really understand.
I think it makes it easier for him, more accurate for him to read the test result.
Exactly. I can better change you for the next level.
Yeah. It doesn't do anything for us. It gives him a better way of looking at it with that protocol.
So you'd adjust the zones that you train in, the watts would be just as tweaking of that. Is that what you mean? Or and the amount of training that one athlete could do? No, so just the zones.
It's only the zones and for sure the prediction of the amount or of the power during a time trial.
Okay.
Ralph, let me ask you, Ralph, are you referring to this as like a capacity or the ability to hold this volume of lactate? And then you're concerned about it overfilling or what?
No, it's like we measure the lactic acid concentration within the blood.
Yes.
So if someone have a higher amount or have a high blood lactate concentration, we thought from the able body sport, if you have something higher than 4 millimoles,
right,
you're above the threshold. With this lower amount of space where we can put the blood or the lactic acid as a wheelchair user, the meaning of the concentration within the blood is changed.
I get it now.
Yeah.
So you can have a higher number, you still not go over the threshold.
Right. And the reason is why, because in the muscles, the same is working still. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So we measure the blood concentration of lactic acid. But this is only the result of a specific work within our muscles. And this is still the same. The only thing is that the change or the number in the blood is changed. And the interpretation of this number is changed of our knowledge from the last 4 months.
And that automatically changes everybody's number.
Yes, in a specific area, not all, not all,
okay.
Only in the middle area.
In the threshold area.
Right.
Hey, Ralph, Sean, I have a question. So do you feel that maybe this is because lactic acid is stored in the non-working muscles below the injury level, and so it doesn't, that lactic acid doesn't affect our workout?
No, the point is that the concentration in our blood is higher because our working muscles produce this. And if we have a higher portion where we can disturb it, the lactic acid concentration in the blood is lower, but the same work.
Yes.
So the meaning is only that we have a higher concentration in the blood, but in the muscles, nothing changed. Yeah, this is the new aspect. So we are doing the same at power. Our muscles produce the same of power, and that means the same amount of lactic acid, like August. In November, it's the same. But now we have the understanding, or I have the understanding, that of this lower, smaller area where we can put the lactic acid instead of the blood, we have higher numbers in the blood, which means nothing changed within the muscles. Instead, we have now the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Ralph, question for you. Does medication or age have any effect on testing from one point to another?
Not really. Yes, for sure. Your ability is decreasing year by year. So your age, because of your root or your kind, how your muscles can be in a better shape, change from year to year. Yeah, so the ability to build new proteins within the muscles is changing. Meaning is, if I am in 10 years, my body needs more time to recover. I need more time to refill after a session. So I'm going slowly but steady, prepared for my last day. Yeah. And this is
around what age, Ralph, that happens?
After 30 years.
After 30 years old?
Yes.
Downhill.
No, I'm not kidding. After the age of 30 years, our body is starting to decrease. So the highest numbers we can reach will be between 20 and 30 in sports. In sport.
Mm-hmm.
If we will train in a proper way after this age, it's only stay in shape.
Come on.
If you have been on the highest level with 30. but I can't remember, I haven't seen anyone which have been in the best possible way with 30. So every one of us is able to get better after the 30s.
Right, right.
But we are fighting every year with 1% of decreasing.
Huh. It's become an old man sport in women.
No, women. So men have 10% per 10 years and women's 8% by 10 years.
Hey, Coach Ralph, this is Lee. Bottom line, sir, based on what you've learned between September and now, can we expect that you are going to change? Are you going to change my training zones based on what you've learned? Or does that only apply to the athletes who were testing for you recently?
Only for testing.
Okay, so, all right, I'll talk to you. I'll send you an email and ask when you want me to test again, because I don't care how old I am. I think what you said only applies to Carlos and Ken and those other people.
Yeah, this is more for the man because they are thinking they can better and better. Yeah, it's
I
a
mean,
man
that's
thing.
like good.
It's a man thing, not a woman thing.
Red wine, of course.
No, see, this woman's assuming she can get better. I just want to beat the young people more frequently.
That's it.
Okay.
Hang around me, young people.
All right, let's wrap it up.
I just don't want to come in last.
No one
You
does.
won't.
Let's wrap this chapter up, Ralph.
Yeah, for sure. I was only thinking it's a few minutes and haven't thought that we get that big discussion about this.
It's exciting stuff.
Hey,
That's
Ralph,
cool.
I have if you don't mind, I have what should be a quick question. I believe it would be.
I
On
don't
that chart,
think Jody liked that.
again, I think it should be a quick question. On that chart that you sent us, the evaluation of our testing, there was a part in there that showed at what power you burn carbohydrates and what part you burn fat. And there was that zone in there where you burn fat. Does that stay constant over time? Is it the same amount for a 1 hour workout as it is for a 4 hour workout, or does that zone change over time?
Okay, and you thought this is a short, easy answering, but this is not. 80% it's the same. 20% there is a change. It's a little bit to change to more body, more fat, but it's mostly the same.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just take a moment here to invite Manny Herrera to acknowledge that he's on. Well, I guess he's not on. Is Manny present?
Oh, can I one thing give you as an information?
Yeah.
I have the results of the road race in Florida.
Okay.
So in 8-3, Ryan, Brandon Lyons, and one guy namens Tingley, I don't know him, and age 4, James Cook, and second, Owen Daniel. And Tom Davis didn't start. Go ahead.
Hey, there's no list there for Razak?
I think he's not within the first 3 of the road race.
No, I think he's only doing the time trial. That was what I had heard, but he could.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that it was a road race. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so you know, one of the things we always do during camp is we present the guide on to this year's winner, and you know, we've done 8 years of this presentation. It's called the Esprit de Corps Award, and it's had a number of people. Many of them are present on this call who were past recipients, and Matt Robinson was the first one. Alfredo de los Santos, who couldn't be with us today, he's in Florida, not racing, but training, is the second recipient. Mark Power is the third. And Carlos Maleta is also the fourth recipient, followed by Will Grew and Emmanuel Herrera, who I've asked to come on here. He had signed on earlier. Hopefully he'll sign on here shortly. And then the seventh person was Gerard Alfouk. And last year, Josh Brandstetter and Savannah were also awarded it in combination. So, yeah. So, you know,
am I not here?
Say that again.
I'm not here.
Okay, there you are. We'll get to you, Manny. 1 second. We'll get with you, okay? Yeah, so it goes without saying that these guys are representing, at least at the time, you know, high level of values that are desirable amongst our organization. And, you know, some of these include dedication to the sport, persistence in the racing, exemplary work ethic, representative of our team, tireless support of the sport, educator of the sport, a contributor to the sport. And I mean in the realm of philanthropy, a mentor of the sport, champion in the field that they're racing in, leadership amongst the members of our team, having high moral fiber, being a promoter of our team and our sport in general, having good sportsmanship, being highly motivated and volunteering and selfless acts. This just names a few, and all these people that were listed earlier have multiple qualities that resemble these. And each and every year, I spend the entire year thinking about who should win it. And, you know, this person would be, they bring a couple more facets to it, but they also embrace numerous ones of these. And I'd ask Manny Herrera to post the guide on now. Manny, can you post the guide on?
Post guide on!
All right. Well, it's rough doing this virtually, but what I'd like to do is that this individual was sent a package and asked them to open it now and acknowledge to us what's in the package. And that way we'll know who this individual is that's receiving the guide on today.
Package.
I mailed a package to the award, the person awarded this.
I'm assuming it's me.
I'm sorry?
I'm assuming it's me.
Okay. Okay.
I was going to say, did the person you sent it to, was it a pirate or a ninja?
Okay. So go ahead and show us your package, please.
Okay.
The contents of your package.
Show us what was in the box.
I gotta open it. What's in the box? What's in the box?
In the future, can you please refrain from saying the word, show us your package?
I mean, it has a completely different meaning coming from me, sir.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, okay.
You can tell Jody wrapped that like an armor.
Yes, yes.
Got one too, but it's Viagra. Why'd you send that?
That's a lot of pills, Mark.
Yeah. You're gonna hold the...
He's a pirate.
Yeah. So much like at a wedding, is there anyone here that objects to the recipient here? Is there anyone else?
Nah,
congratulations, Valette.
I have a guide on.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Do I have to put this out at my house?
No.
You have to ride that on your bike.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll put it someplace worthy. But I was going to say, is there anyone else here that has any thing they'd like to raise to this?
Yeah, I received a package as well.
Oh, okay. There's another person that's contesting this award. Go ahead, Sean.
There's a box in here.
Woohoo!
Inside that box.
Oh, the tools.
The tools of life.
They're nice.
You also got. Oh.
And along with that box,
$10,000.
Well, yeah. Well, so we've got two awardees this year. It was a tight race, and both of these individuals, they share a number of common traits. Each of them has spent some time in Colorado. All of them have a passion for two-wheeled contraptions before there are accidents. You know, and they've both given heavily to the sport, even in the past year. I don't know if you're aware that, well, most of you are aware that we do a virtual training 6 days a week, and these two have been there for their appointed days. Most of the days, you know, and we've been doing it almost for 12 months now. So to you both, welcome to the club, if you will. the Esprit de Corps, and I don't know that this will continue after I retire. It's been a joy to award 10 of these guidons to the most worthy. Now, it's not to say that other people on the team haven't done their fair share. It's our success is relied in each and every person that was present for even 10 years ago. But I'd like to pass the floor off, ladies first, to hear some remarks from Valette, and then we'll hear some words from Sean. Welcome aboard.
Well, thank you. I will first say that I'm sure Mark Power understands how much I need these tools.
Don't look at me.
And how useful they'll be. But I don't have anything wise or profound to say. Just that I won't say show you, or I won't show you my package, but I will say thank you for this. I mean, I hope I can do more. I don't feel like I've done enough for this, but I will continue to try and do my best for our sport and getting it all out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well deserved, yes.
Well, thank you, Jody, and thank you to everybody who participated in the children's cancer research fundraiser that we did, and I hope that we can double those numbers next year. These are fantastic tools, but I have to say, being a parent of an 8-year-old boy, more than likely he will use these to chip ice or to throw in the yard or something like that, and I'll have to come out and beat him. But I really appreciate all the support that Jody gives to the team, and without his leadership and sacrifices, this would be a completely different program and a completely different sport that I think we wouldn't enjoy near as much without Jody's leadership and support. So thank you very much.
Well said.
Well, I'll challenge Matt, since he hasn't been around for, at least on this platform we've been working on for the last year, to inform them of the official handshake of those that are within this Esprit de Corps. I don't know the details on it, but he can go in that with you the next time he's present. I don't know. Are you coming to Huntsville with us, Matt?
When is Huntsville?
The 17th and 18th of April. All right, that's a conversation we can have later. You can think about it, 17, 18 April. Don't want to put you on the spot. But is anyone else have any words regarding this presentation, past recipients or anyone on the call?
I'd like to say congratulations to the both of you. I don't think it changes anything more than just continue on being who you are, stay true to what you believe in. And, we're an organization that needs to support ourselves. I wish that there was more of that out there, more people going out, more people trying to be advocates in our community, and letting people know what we do. And when I say this, I'm talking the businesses and things like that, where it's great that we raise money for other organizations, but it's getting to the point where we need to focus on raising money for our own organization to help the veterans that don't have as much as other veterans do, that don't have the capabilities to get out to all the races and things like that. I try my best everywhere I go to grab at least one or two guys that are close to me and bring them, whether they want to go or not. And so we need to focus on that, because as we know what Jody brought to the table, we can also guess on what may leave the table. So I think it's important that we all continue to support this organization and look for ways to help raise money and equipment and things like that to carry on.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I'm going to ask Manny to go ahead and retire the guide on. I don't want you passing out in your garage there, my friend. All right, someone else can have the floor.
Manny.
He's the best.
How many people are going to Huntsville from PVA?
Oh, Lord, it's going to be a dozen and a half at least.
Okay.
Yeah. But let's stay on track. Has anybody got any other Esprit de Corps comments, recommendations, gripes? Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Lovely to see y'all. Congrats, Sean. Congrats, Valette. Welcome to the club. We miss you guys so much. Our year's been so lacking and just hanging out and doing what we do with you. Hopefully we'll see some of you in Huntsville, and hopefully we'll see some of you shortly after that. But we miss you. We love you. Congrats to the 2 new recipients.
Woohoo!
That's it. That's all I got.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, hey, and Josh, bring some tomato seeds to Huntsville, please.
Man, I will.
Anyone else?
Me.
Okay, Manny, what's up?
Only you can protect yourself to the extent. Okay? You do your part to stay safe, and if everybody else don't do their part, well, at least you're safe.
Welcome to the PVA meeting.
And I never thought I would live to see this day.
You're living it.
Yeah. So,
Manny, are you still on pain meds?
He's on meds, that's for sure.
Somebody needs to give him a
but
vaccine.
once again, okay, I'm telling this story here, folks. Okay, once again, this is Manny Herrera reporting live for Paralyzed Veterans Racing Wellness and Fitness from Payson, Arizona to Germany and all over across the world and the United States. So everybody be safe. Arrivederci. Auf Wiedersehen. Choose. All right. Manny Herrera. Russia.
Out.
Oh, shit. Oh.
I'm gonna miss this, Jody.
I got a feeling he's going to move next to me after I retire. Oh, I love that, man.
Oh,
all right. So I guess at this point, I'm going to ask Holly if she still has a question that was germane to bike law, because your hand's been up for like 90 minutes.
Oh, and by the way, I did this thing.
It was back when Rachel was on. I wanted to know whether there was a standard for bike lanes, because they're building a bike lane right out in front of my house. And I was just wondering what to expect, because a lot of times, or I'm thinking that the bike lane is, motorists are just going to think it's an extra space for them, the same way that like parking places, handicap parking places, the motorists always think that striped area is just an extra space for them. So I was just wondering whether it was standard or, if each state has a different bike lane requirement.
Bike lanes are not that safe for us to ride on. I hate to say it. For any of us to ride on bike lanes by yourself. If you're riding with somebody else, with a couple of able-bodied riders, I would ride on a bike lane, but I wouldn't ride on a bike lane by myself anymore.
Okay.
But, I've had Rachel's email that we have posted to everyone on the chat board here. But I think the most important thing that I heard from her was that, I'm not telling you not to have your safety equipment and not to, bike lane isn't going to protect you either. The point is you have to limit your risk. I mean, if it's an acceptable risk to you, that's one thing, be in a bike lane. But you need to think about there's more people than just yourself that are involved. You've got your family, you got your friends and all that kind of stuff. And, it's hard to believe that it's going to soon be 2 years that, David's passing. And, just if anything good's come out of this COVID is that, every 90 days we were having someone that was getting injured on their bike. And that hasn't happened during COVID, because it's hard to injure yourself when you're riding indoors. But so just know that you can contact Rachael, and I think I can get her to get back on. She just leads a pretty busy life like we all do. And the stars aligned for today. We just happen to have a vacancy and she was willing to take it. But
we've had flat
Holly,
tires,
if you can't hear back from Rachael, I'll make an effort to contact her. Thank you for that question, Holly.
Okay.
Hey, Jody, we've had flat tires though.
Yeah. It's
like
good to see
Jim
Mike there too.
Yeah.
Good to see Mike Brooks there.
Yep, right there.
Hey, how you doing?
Yes, good to see you.
Good to see everybody.
Yep. Okay, well, I'm gonna stop the recording. So if you guys have anything you don't record to comment on, you're welcome to do it now.